I cannot remember why I was reading the original novel of Dracula, but I never realized that it was an epistolary novel, that it was written in, like, letters and journal entries and all that stuff. And, like, letters and journal entries and telegrams and notes and newspaper clippings, that is not normal for an epistolary novel. That's really, like, playing with the format of how these work. And I get to the end of chapter 4 and see Jonathan write, "This may be my last journal entry. I don't know if I'm going to survive the night." And we jump over to a completely different character's perspective with a completely different story. And I'm just like, what happened to Jonathan? Is he okay? Did he die? And I think that's how it feels when somebody drops the camera in a found footage movie. And I realized, oh my gosh, the only way to adapt Dracula in a way that feels how it feels emotionally and physiologically and viscerally and experientially, how it feels to read the original novel, is to make it found footage. I made a video talking about why I think found footage would be the best way to approach it, to capture the experience of reading the novel. And then 40,000 people saw that video, and like 100 people were like, yes, do this. And some people were like, let's make a Kickstarter for this. And Shanna Stoker, Bram Stoker's descendant, says, yes, this is how you adapt Dracula. At first I thought, you know what, I don't actually have really a love for Dracula or a love for found footage. But then after a while I realized I do have a love for my audience. And this became a wonderful opportunity to take found footage and see what else you can do with it. And I really do love playing with the format. Honestly, there were a few scenes where I really wish we could have shown more than one person in the same room. Especially when Olgren and the ship captain are talking and they're starting to get more paranoia throughout the ship. I would have loved to do some sort of found footage style scene where we see the entire crew of sailors and they start to push and shove and accuse and fight and start getting actually violent to the point that Olgren realizes, I have to go find the stowaway or they're going to start turning violent toward me. Well, the thing is, when you're filming remotely, you don't have that option. You get one person in frame for each scene, unless you do like a ridiculous amount of scheduling. Also, we just didn't have the budget to show that many people in one scene. So instead, we had to write around it and imply a lot of what was going on in the background. The good news is, Bram Stoker's novel is always written from one person's point of view at a time. And so we took a lot of inspiration from that style to say, we can just have people talk about what happened. We can have people imply what happened off screen because that's very much how Bram Stoker's novel feels. It's a lot of talking and very little showing because that's kind of inherent to the format of a epistolary novel. But a lot of the strength of having only one person on set at a time is that all of a sudden, the fact that you can't see Dracula on screen becomes a logistical and narrative strength rather than an artistic choice.
I'm RJ Hall. I'm an actor as well as a starting filmmaker for myself as well. I have been part of the haunted house walkthrough industry since 2009 at Castle of Chaos. It's a local one out here in Utah. Been with them for many, many years. Worked up to be an actor coach there. So I've learned how to do it pretty well, if I say so myself. He's insane, he's obsessed, and it's simple directive that can just be exaggerated so well, of just crazy and obsessed. And you can just go into that. It's kind of self-isolating as well, the idea of Renfield. So getting into that character is much more isolating in a sense and looking to entertain yourself, definitely on the aspect of loneliness, to an extreme. Again, it's like a lot of it is taken to extremes, but it's simple concepts. And that's what I absolutely love to play, is simple concepts that have just gone to the extreme. We can now take those little dots of information from the story, revitalize it so that it's modern time, and be able to tell that story in this way. That's what I absolutely love, and how it's modernized at this point with today's day and age, and how it's like cameras are literally everywhere on everyone's phone. Literally, there's a camera in here as well, which makes perfect sense. So it's like there's all these cameras everywhere. Why haven't they picked up something? And so it's just like we can take these lores and all of this stuff that is these stories from way back when and really revitalize it into today's day and age, which is necessary because too many times people are desensitized with the idea of the story and it being modern times. So this helps brings more of a personal approach to the audience on how these lores can be and how all of these classic monsters and classic horror stories can still be very effective to this day, even though we've known about them for hundreds of years. I was nervous actually going into it, even though I've done Renfield before, because this is much more film adaptation than it is haunt adaptation. So I was nervous, but then like going into it, I'm just like, I know what I'm doing. I need to stop doubting myself. Just know that he may seem human, but when you look a little bit more into it, into the eyes, into the teeth, into the nose, into the ears, even into the head, something will always be off.
I start filming and I realize we can't cut. This is one unbroken take for an hour. We did that and I realized what I'd imagined wouldn't have worked for an hour. What I'd imagined has like maybe 3 minutes of potential. And so we tried what I imagined, and it was much more expressive. It was much more movement. I specifically told RJ, play to the back of the theater. Like try to talk and to move as if you're acting on theater instead of acting on film, and you're trying to reach the little old lady in the back of the auditorium. Then we tried that out, and in the middle of that, I'm starting to reveal some plot information, realizing, oh, this scene happened after the previous scene. We might as well make this a second scene.
Yes. And I remember it's like, you know what, I'll just play right into this. Because mostly what we did was improv acting.
All of it was improv.
All of it was
we had
improv.
like 2 lines prepared in advance.
Yeah, so it's like basically that going back and forth. It was just like, all right, we're letting this story unfold with the way that the characters are and in the place of the plot that we were in. So that's one thing that I really, really liked, was how the second scene came out of nowhere, but it left me as an actor to be more on my feet with how to react, especially as the character.
So we got our second take on that second one, and by that time I realized John Seward wants information from Renfield because Lucy's been getting worse, and so I had an actual goal, and by that time, RJ realized Renfield has a goal in this scene.
Yes, it's like I realized, it's like, oh yeah, what would Renfield's goal be? Oh, the plan taking effect. Now that I know that this part of the plan has happened, now the next one can happen here real soon. So I was definitely more excited on that end. If you pay attention enough, you can actually see the little clues that I put in throughout all of the takes if you want to go to the Patreon and look at all of those full shots.
There's even a shot in the second scene, the one where he's much more animalistic and expressive, where so before that scene, RJ had to ask me, what are you okay with? What are your limits? What would you feel safe with? Kind of like if we were at a haunted house. One of the really nice things about filming remotely is that, well, this film was inspired by TikTok. This film was encouraged by TikTok. And I wanted to turn this film into a gift to my TikTok audience. And so we were able to cast through TikTok, and we were able to cast at least one very prominent TikToker. We had a couple others who just couldn't make it due to scheduling conflicts. And because of that, we were able to work with people who I already knew and liked working with, and also people who would be the best for the role, even if they weren't within the location. And that opened up so many more possibilities for just the right person to play the role, as opposed to just whoever happens to be in town at the right time. Filming remotely also brings a lot of challenges and a lot of blessings. Unless you want them to show you every single take afterward, you don't get to see what was actually on the screen. You get to see their performance. You sometimes only get to hear their performance because their performance is not within the walls of your Skype call or your Discord call or your Zoom call, which means you have to really focus on the actor's performance. You don't get to think about visuals. You don't get to think about how that performance plays on camera. You really only get to think about the performance itself, which, going back, I'm realizing I would like in the future, if I ever do something like this again, if I ever film remotely again, to do playback. Yes, it's more expensive, but it'll make it so that I not only trust the actors implicitly, but I also get to give direction to the actors. But the nice part about found footage is that you don't need a crazy set, you don't need crazy lights, you don't need crazy sound, you don't need PAs, you don't need crafty, you don't need anything. All you need is an actor and a phone. And that is an absolutely wonderful position to be in, because you can have the entire set be a director and an actor. Or when it was my character scenes, the entire set could be one person, which made it the easiest logistical work that I've ever done in my life. The other difficulty is lag. Discord has a lot of lag, especially on my computer, because like my internet is not great. And so in the finished product, you'll see moments of the ship captain, for example, was speaking, and then I would respond to give him something to work off of, to give him some energy and some timing to respond to. Well, the problem is that leads to him saying things like, "Kid, get that camera out of my face." And about 3 full seconds later, the response coming, "It's for the reality show." But honestly, it was an absolute joy to be working with people who I would never get to work with. I mean, I will never have an opportunity of like flying out to DC to work with Nikhil Clayton or flying out to England to work with Chris Matthews. So it was wonderful to get to work with people who I would never get to work with, who honestly I loved working with. They were all wonderful people.
Honestly, whenever someone asks me what I do, I tell them I make silly skits online about comic books. So that's my main go-to. But I run a TikTok channel called my name, Nikhil Clayton, that posts original skits about comic book characters and taxes and a bunch of other weird things. I've not had any actual experience working on a film before like this, outside of like projects for short films in school. And I've definitely never actually been directed. So it's very fun to get to go on the other side of this and be the actor and get to get notes. And like, I just took a directing course last semester. So it's pretty freeing, to be honest. Like, I don't have to worry about the tone that I'm setting, or like, especially that I didn't write it. Like, usually when I make my skits, I'm always thinking of like funny lines and stuff that I have to say next because I'm mainly improvised. But it's very nice to just get to sit down and read it and focus on just how I'm saying the words and not have to worry about writing it or how it looks or anything like that. Like, that's all you. We've talked over TikTok before, and we collabed once before, and it was a very good time. And also, the idea of found footage Dracula is just like one of those things that once it's like said, you're like, oh, like that's fantastic. You know, like there's ideas for movies that people come up with, and you're like, that's gonna be so cool. And so, and the chance that you were saying in your video that, you know, there was an all audio option, so I didn't have to worry about like flying out somewhere. So I'm always down for experience. It was a really good time. Like I said, I've never done something like this before. It was fun to jump in and get to do it. The first one was just that you really wanted me to act as if I had been the killer all along.
I told Nikhil that Olgren did it, but I told Alex the ship captain did it. The main reason was to get that feeling of unsettling ambiguity, unsettling uncertainty, so that you really do not know who did it, and you don't even know, like, did Dracula even go on board this boat? Is this actually just a murder mystery about two guys who both think they did it? Because if you're doing a Dracula movie, we're going to assume there's a Dracula. And so to get the ambiguity, we had to really lean hard into there is no Dracula.
I think going into it, it's a very fascinating concept to adapt Dracula in this way, and it's very true to form for the book. It's very cool to see an old story adapted so accurately to like the modern age, and I think that's the thing to appreciate about it. The fact that the theme and the message and even the structure is so easily transferable to the modern age is amazing to me.
One of the weird things about found footage is that it comes with this premise that a fictional character is filming this footage, which leads to sometimes somebody voicing that character, sometimes somebody playing that character on screen, sometimes somebody playing that character because they're holding the camera and that character's holding the camera. Like, in some sense, when you're doing found footage, the cinematographer is always an actor. That's something that I found in my first found footage film, Cursed Camera, where our cinematographer and I had to sit down and think about why the character would be moving this camera in this way at this time, and really think through a character-based, diegetic, in-universe reason for every single camera movement. We took the same principle and applied it to this film, and the convenient part is that everybody who is holding a camera is predominantly an actor and second, a cinematographer. So, with the Olgren sequences, we had Alex Davis sitting in front of the camera and kind of directing the camera. His wife, Sandra Davis, was sitting behind the camera, operating the camera. Nikhil Clayton was doing the voice of Olgren. So in some sense, Sandra was playing Olgren. In some sense, Alex was playing Olgren. In some sense, Nikhil was playing Olgren. In some sense, I was playing Olgren because there's a scene where Olgren is running down a hallway looking for the stowaway. And that's just me holding the camera and throwing Nikhil's voice underneath it, which really emphasizes character and immersion and story in a horror movie, where the entire point is tone and where immersion is a servant of tone rather than the end goal in and of itself. But it really does force you to think about character as you're doing cinematography, which is going to be something that I'm going to bring into a lot of my future work.
My name is Anton Moss, and I will be playing Jonathan Harker.
One thing that I don't think we talk about enough as filmmakers is needing to recast due to scheduling conflicts. We sometimes talk about this piece of trivia of, oh, such and such actor was supposed to play such and such character until scheduling conflicts happened, and so somebody else got casted. But you never really think about applying that to your own movie. And this is something that just happens in film sometimes. It's not a problem. It's just something that happens and you get over it and you work through it. As some examples, we had two different people scheduled to play Lucy. Both of them had scheduling conflicts or communication problems, and we just couldn't talk to the person for like 2 weeks. Or you might have noticed if you saw the Kickstarter that we had an actor named Anton Moss playing Jonathan Harker in that Kickstarter. Anton would have been the perfect Jonathan. As soon as I was writing the script, I was thinking, this should be Anton. I've worked with him before in a couple projects, and like, I knew he would nail the role. And then it turns out that he's a huge fan of Bram Stoker and a huge fan of classic literature. And I'm like, yes, I would love to bring you on for this project. And we got to film 1 day of filming for like 3 hours and to get the money to be able to film the rest of his stuff. And then Anton got a job. And then Anton got COVID. And then Anton's phone broke. And just one thing led to another, until eventually it got to a point of like, we're wrapping production this week and we still don't have Jonathan's footage. And please understand, none of this is a slight to Anton at all, just communication issues, scheduling issues, phone issues. Stuff happens sometimes. And sometimes you just have to recast. And Mitch Tyler did an amazing job playing the character of Jonathan with a different approach. But oh my gosh, he did a great job at it. I mentioned Shanna Stoker was one of the people who encouraged this film. And if you don't know the name Stoker, well, the book of Dracula was written by Bram Stoker. And from the Kickstarter, we were talking with her about playing Mina Murray, and then scheduling issues and communication issues. And a lot of stuff happened in Shanna's life. It's not my story to tell, But a lot of stuff happened where I'm realizing that we should have somebody else play the character for the sake of getting the movie done. And again, this is no slight towards Shanna. This is just stuff that happens in film that we don't really talk about very much as filmmakers outside of just trivia. We don't really talk about, oh my gosh, we have 1 week left to film and we have still not casted 3 of our main characters. Or rather, we still need to recast 3 of our main characters, Jonathan, Lucy, and Mina. Fortunately, I have a lot of friends in the Utah film industry, and some of them were just like, oh my gosh, you would make a perfect Lucy. Oh my gosh, you would make a perfect Mina. Oh my gosh, you would make a perfect Jonathan. So I mentioned that voice over IP systems like Skype, Zoom, and Discord just have lag sometimes, especially if your internet is not great. Well, it gets really weird when you're listening to an actor do their lines and suddenly an entire line cuts out and you're like, I don't know if you actually said your line or if Skype was just weird for a minute. It happens sometimes. But also we had some moments of technical difficulties that caused not just, hey, can you say that line one more time? Or, hey, did you get that line? I couldn't hear it. We had some technical difficulties that let us say we need to reshoot this entire thing. Specifically with the ship captain, we had some audio issues. And this is met with no slight toward Alex or Sandra at all. This is just something that happens in the film industry, and we don't really talk about reshoots very much. When we do, we talk about reshoots as an insult, as some sort of signal that the movie is going to go drastically, wildly wrong, when what we don't realize is that reshoots are baked into the schedule and into the budget. Reshoots are not a sign of the movie being bad. They're a sign of logistical problems and taking care of those logistical problems, or just making things even better than they already were. You would think when your entire cast and crew can be one person, when your entire set can be just one person, maybe 2 people, that you just message somebody and say, hey, when are you available? Anybody who has tried to make plans with a friend as an adult knows it is not that simple. People have lives, people have work. And sure, you're paying people, but you're not paying people enough for them to be like, hey, I can take work off for this. No, this is going to be something where people will schedule the filming around their lives, not schedule their lives around the filming. So while we were originally intending to start filming at the beginning of December, like a couple days after the Kickstarter ended, because after all, we'd already casted Jonathan and Mina, we realized we couldn't actually start until I want to say it was February. It might have been January. One of the premises of found footage is that a character is filming this, but another premise of found footage is that a character edited this. We don't really get any character who would be the person editing everything together. A couple people have been suggesting that idea. We do intend to do that later on. We intend for Jekyll and Hyde to be Gabe Utterson's TikTok feed, specifically his TikTok feed, or for Phantom of the Opera to be intentionally edited by Raoul and with a target audience in mind and with a certain message that he's trying to get out there. With found footage Dracula, Bram Stoker was the compiler of the book. And so in some sense, I wanted to present it as Bueller is the compiler of the footage. But also I thought it would just be a little creepier if you don't know who edited this and you don't know why. Found footage Dracula was originally conceived to be just its own thing. And then I also wanted to do a Jekyll and Hyde movie because Jekyll and Hyde is cool and there's never been a book-accurate adaptation of it. And then I also wanted to do a Frankenstein movie because there are very few book-accurate adaptations of Frankenstein. And then I realized I really like Dorian Gray. Dorian Gray is one of my favorite novels. It's got so many cool ideas to it. I would love to make a Dorian Gray movie. And then as I keep talking about this on my TikTok, people keep saying, Bueller Studios Monsterverse! Bueller Studios Monsterverse! And so after all of these had already been planned, I'm like, can we put these in the same universe? And so some things that you'll probably notice as you go through these. There's a podcast host in Found Footage Dracula named Chris Matheson. He's the host of True Horror. He's the conspiracy theorist, brash, rude, obnoxious weirdo who basically exists to make the audience say, oh, if this crazy guy believes there are vampires, there probably aren't vampires in this movie. And we are hoping to bring him back for every movie.
I was just scrolling one day and your casting call popped up and I was like, shoot, yeah, no, I definitely want to be a part of this. And so I filmed an audition on my phone and sent it in, and here we are.
When Bueller sent out the audition and he said, you can just make a video on your phone, whatever works, because it's a found footage film. I was like, shoot, I have to like invent all my own material. And so I started thinking about what I could be a conspiracy theorist about and what I could put some like genuine, honest feeling into. And what it ended up being was just a really interesting conversation surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. I just kind of put all of that thought and that character that I built around this small audition scene into Charles Matheson. All right, guys, you heard what that guy said. You heard everything that we talked about, all right? Did you see how he didn't even flinch as he was talking about literally making ourselves better meat for the vampires?
I really like the concept of indie film in general. Again, it's not something I'm incredibly experienced with, but I really like it conceptually. I enjoy acting. It's a lot of fun. I did theater in high school, and I like acting as a thing. It's just fun. And so I do like just kind of hopping on opportunities to do that. Other than that, like the concept of the found footage Dracula film, I am kind of a traditionalist in a lot of ways. I really, really enjoy things that do their best to pay homage to what has come before and to recognize kind of the inheritance that any kind of storytelling is going to have. And something that I end up coming back to a lot is how different fantasy novels interact with the genre as a whole, what they choose to keep, what they choose not to keep. So seeing a version of Dracula that attempts to portray the film in the way that the book is written and create the same feeling as the book, I think is a really cool idea. Especially in horror, which is such an experiential genre, right? It's a lot more about experiencing something than it is about viewing a narrative. And so when you're trying to generate a specific experience, I think it's really cool to see another adaptation kind of attempting to do the same thing in a different medium.
Because they can't use the word that's already there, and the word is vampire. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
We are going into this trying to make a movie. And then trying to make sure that that movie still fits with the universe, that it doesn't actively contradict the idea of the cinematic universe. But we are not building a universe. We are building a series of movies and making sure they all fit in the universe. It's the difference between building a puzzle and building a couple puzzle pieces because individual puzzle pieces look cool, and then making sure those puzzle pieces fit together. I mostly say that because I feel like a lot of the time we talk bad about cinematic universes, specifically with the criticism they were not trying to make a movie, they were trying to make a universe. And I do want to clarify, we are trying to make a movie, and occasionally doing things like, hey, this would be cool to bring back.
Thank you all so much to our amazing audience members for all their love and support, and we all hope you enjoy and take away a lot from this. What our minds and bodies are capable of achieving without any second thought is amazing. So never forget that. You are capable of great things, all of you. I know you are. So I hope you enjoy.
Just enjoy the movie. I'm pretty sure I will, so.
No, thank you for watching, and can't wait for you all to actually see this film. Can't wait for all of it to be put together and for you guys to watch this and the story itself. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for supporting this film. I know I say it a lot, but if it weren't for the people on TikTok who said, yes, please make this movie, we want to see this movie, this never would have got started. I am just so grateful for all of your support.